Hi, I'm Scott Mansell from Driver 61 and welcome to our Ask a Coach series where we answer your track related questions. Today's question comes from Richard in London and he asks, what are the usual quick wins when you're driving on track? Well, obviously there's no substitute for experience and good coaching, but the three things that I would say are the quickest wins when you're driving on track is to have excellent vision, to be smooth when you're coming off the brakes, and to use all of the track available to you. So first up, we're going to talk about vision. Now, if you've seen any of our tutorials on the Driver 61 site, you'll know that vision is the most critical technique to perfect to make you quick on the circuit. Now, when you're coming into the corner and whenever you're at any point on the circuit, you need to be looking well ahead of yourself so that all the information that you take from the track comes at you and you have time to process that information and make sense of it before you have to actually turn into the corner or even get on the brakes. So, for example, you should be looking far enough ahead of yourself so that even before you get on the brakes, you're looking at the apex of the corner, a couple of stages ahead of where you are already on the circuit. So to put this more simply, imagine we're coming up to a hairpin left. We're keeping the car over to the right hand side, we're travelling along the straight, almost at our maximum velocity, and before we get on the brakes, and quite a long time before we get on the brakes, we're actually looking across at the apex, looking for the curb so we can judge how far away from that point we are. Then we get on the brakes and we're still looking all the way across at the apex. As the car decelerates and we're thinking about turning the car into the apex, we're still looking at the apex, and as we come in towards the apex, our vision then shifts towards the exit so that we have a good amount of time before each stage and each process that we need to put into the car so that all of this information comes at us as early as we possibly can. Do this and you'll just find that your whole driving style becomes a lot more relaxed and everything's a lot simpler because you're giving your brain a lot more time to process all of the information as you're driving around the circuit. It will also help with your consistency. You won't make as many mistakes because again, you're getting all this information from the circuit and you're able to process it with time in hand. The second thing that you can do to find a big win in time on the circuit is to come off the brake pedal as smoothly as possible. A lot of amateur drivers and even some good racing drivers hold the brakes on into the corner a little bit too long, and then when they come off the brakes, they come off them too harshly. Now this overslowing of the car is mainly due to vision and a lack of confidence. So it's another good reason to get your vision correct when you're on the circuit. So when you're coming into the corner, try to be conscious of how you're coming off the brakes. It's critically important. That last little section when you're just releasing the brake pedal needs to be silky, silky smooth. Now, if you come off the brakes and you feel the front of the car pop up, then actually you've come off the brakes too harshly. If you can feel anything when you come off the brakes, then you've done it too harshly. So what you actually need to do is to come off the brakes as smooth as you possibly can so you can't actually feel the front of the car rise up. This will keep the car a lot more stable. It will transfer the weight or the load around the car a lot more smoothly and mean that you can carry a bit more speed into the corner. So if you need a bit more information on this, watch our tutorials on the drive61.com site. You want to check out the trail braking tutorial and the weight transfer tutorial, which explains this technique in a lot more detail. And the final thing that I see a lot of drivers doing is actually not using all of the road available to them. Obviously, when you restrict the amount of track that you use, you're making the corner actually tighter than it really needs to be, and so you can't carry as much speed through that corner. So again, this comes from vision. Vision is so important. It's something we always talk about on Driver 61, but you need to make sure that your vision is a long way ahead of yourself and nice and broad so that you're using your peripheral vision to use all of the circuit as you're driving through a lap. Now, one thing that you should be doing is understanding the actual limits of your track car. So this is actually really interesting thing to do when you're maybe on a cool down lap or coming back into the pits. you need to just drive your car onto the curb or onto the edge of some rough tarmac so that you can actually feel where the edge of the car is without actually looking down at the side. You need to know exactly where the edges and the extremities of your car is, so that when you're driving and looking a long way ahead of yourself, you can use all of the circuit. Now, when we're talking about using all of the circuit, I've seen drivers that use exactly all of the circuit, but they won't use any of the curbing. Now, this is another confidence thing. It's something that takes a little bit of time to build up to, but obviously you need to make the corner as wide as you possibly can. So if you can use a little bit of curb at the apex or even the entry, and especially on the exit, then you should use it. Now, this is not to say that you should be using all the curbs. If we take an example of a circuit like Alton Park, there's some very vicious curbs there that if we take them, then the car will jump and we will actually come off the racing line because the car's catapulting itself over the curb. At most modern circuits, such as Silverstone, Donington, most of the curbs at Brands Hatch, they're nice and flat, they're nice and consistent around the circuit, so you can use usually as much as you want. So in this case, we should be using all of the apex curbs and all of the exit curbs as we go through a corner. And we could add as much as a metre to the width of the circuit, and that makes a huge difference to the speed that you can carry through the corner and therefore your lap time. Now, the final thing that I will say is if you really want to progress quickly on the circuit, you should get a driver coach. A driver coach will help you throughout the day. He can set a reference, he can sit next to you, and your progression will be so much quicker with a professional telling you where your weak points are and where you can improve as quickly as possible. So we have a recommended instructors list on the Driver 61 website, which I'll link to below. So that's all for today's Ask a Coach video. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe just down here. And if you want to check out the rest of the Drivers University series, please click up here to go to the Driver 61 site and see the University series. Thank you and goodbye.